So you want a sports car with some GT capabilities, but don't want to lose a fortune to depreciation? No worries, I'll guide you through the cars you should steer clear of if you care about resale values, and those that should definitely be on your shortlist. Traditionally, front-engine GT cars have a high depreciation rate. There are then also big differences between the various models. Now, as you're used to, this video is packed with data. We'll start by inspecting the price trends of the LC500, V8 Vantage, F-Type, AMG GTs, Romas and Californias. After that, we'll assess which cars lost the least and the most, and how the depreciation rates compare to the rest of the market. Let's get started. Over here we have the price trend for the LC500 petrol-only versions, split by the coupes and the convertibles. We can see that, just as in many other markets, prices declined since the market top of mid-2022. But more about the market trend later in this video. When it comes to the LC500, we can see that prices have been falling linearly. Unlike some other cars, there's no decrease in the depreciation rate visible. The year-over-year rates are with 13.4% for the coupes and 16.5% for the convertibles, then also on the high side. In monetary terms, we're looking at $10,000 and $17,300. The rate for the convertible is a bit higher because these cars are a few years younger. And that brings us to an important point. These rates are averages. The LC500 has been with us for quite some time, and this means that we can start to see differences between the older and the younger cars. 2018 coupes lost, for example, 12.2% or $9,000, while 2021 coupes are down by 17% or $16,000. These dynamics are in line with a traditional depreciation pattern, like we saw before the pandemic. Let's move on to the next car, the V8 Vantage. Over here we have the prices for the most recent generation, split by the coupes and the convertibles, excluding the AMRs. We can see a price development that's similar to the LC500. Prices are decreasing. Coupes are down by 14.1% and roadsters by 19.3%. And these numbers equal $18,000 and $33,500 respectively. Again, the roadsters are slightly newer, explaining the higher depreciation rate. Contrary to the LC500, there's a clear difference in depreciation pattern between the old and the newer cars. We'll do a little deep dive. If we inspect the price trends for the coupes for the different model years, we can see that 2020 and 2019 cars seem to have passed their inflection point. Depreciation rates decreased significantly during 2023, while 2021 cars continue to fall. The market for 2022 cars is very small, so the increase that you see over here is not really an increase. Now for you as a buyer, all of this means that buying a 2019 or 2020 example could be a smart move. These cars will still depreciate, but the biggest drops appears to be behind us. Moving on to the 4.7 liter, we can see trends that look completely different. Over here we have the prices for the S, GTs and base models. We can see that prices increased till mid-2022, then topped and decreased, but started to decrease slower during 2023. And this is in line with, for example, some 911s. However, you can also see that the confidence intervals are large due to the small market. And this goes especially for the GTs and the S's. There's more uncertainty in these numbers. Supply for the N420s and GTS's was then also too low to include them here. Compared to last year, base models are down by 7.1%, S's are down by 5%, and GTs are up by 10%. In all honesty though, I would rely on the number of the base model and dismiss the one for the S and GTs. The latter two changes are then also not statistically confirmed. Moving on to the 4.3 liter, we can see a similar trend. An increase till the summer of 2022, followed by a decline and a decrease in that decline. Compared to last year, prices are down by 6.8%. These cars, however, can be listed for a longer time. Sometimes more than 50% of the stock is for sale for longer than 3 months. They do then also get discounted by rates up to 10% if they do not sell within 3 months. Adjusted for inflation, prices just dipped below their pre-pandemic level, and this is quite a decent result. And with that, it's time to move on to the F-types, but we'll only discuss the V6s and the V8s. There are a lot of models to discuss here, so I will keep it at a high level. Starting with the first generation or pre-facelift V6s, we can see that the trends for the base model and the S's are similar, and also in line with the market trend. a large decline in the second half of 2022, followed by a flattening of the trend. This means that base models lost 12.1% compared to last year, and S's 14.8%. 400 Sports lost marginally more at 16.5%. The flattening seems a bit less profound in this trend, as they are the youngest cars. Moreover, I saw that some cars that didn't sell within 3 months got discounted by 14%, so you might be able to get a good deal on a 400 Sport if it has been sitting around for a long time. P340s and P380s are excluded from this graph, as I don't have enough data for them just yet. Continuing with the V8s before the facelift, we can see that they did a tad better than the V6s. The SVR is down by 13.8%, the S by 19.6%, and the Rs by 10.6%. Especially the curve of the S is interesting. Did they finally bottom? It's one of the oldest cars in the list, as it turned 10 years old this year, a number which typically could be associated with the start of a bottom. Moving on to the second generation V6s, so the P380s, we can see that prices are falling quickly. They fell by 15.8% or $12,000 during 2023. And this is of course driven by the newness of the car and the relatively low mileages. If we then have a look at the last segment, the facelifted V8s, we can see that Rs are down by 15.3%, P450 all-wheel driven versions by 14.5%, and P450's rear-wheel driven versions by 8.1%. And this market turned out to be actually a bit tricky to analyze due to the large volume of new cars that sometimes push the market up. The 8% of the P450 is then also likely to be an underestimation. Personally, I would rely on the other two numbers. And speaking about the new cars, they can sit around for a while. Between 60 and 80% of the new cars are unsold after 3 months. Now so far we covered the LC500, Fiat Vantage and F-Type market. And this also means that we covered a lot of numbers. But don't worry, after a few more cars I will summarize all of them so that we end up with a nice overview. Next on the list is the AMG GT. Starting with the base, S and C models, we can see that depreciation rates are consistent across the range. Base models lost 12.9%, S is 12.4% and C is 13%. No big surprises over here. In monetary terms you're looking at $12.9, $11,000 and $17,000. The older models lost slightly less than these rates, but the differences are relatively small. Looking at the AMG GTR Coupes, excluding the Pros, we can see that values declined rapidly after the summer of 2022, but again started to decrease slower during 2023. Last year prices dropped by 6.4% or $10,500, significantly less than for the non-R models, and overall quite a good result. But more about that later. Let's have a look now at the last brand, Ferrari. We'll have a look at the price trends of the Roma and the California. The V12 will be included in the semi-annual front-engine Ferrari market update. Starting with the California, we can see the familiar boom and bust pattern. Prices have been falling since the summer of 2022, and this means that the normal California is now 8.9% or $10,600 cheaper than 1 year ago. For the California T, this is 9.3% or $14,900. With a median price of $145,000, prices are then also lower than before the pandemic. Naturally, if we adjust these trends for inflation, we can see that California Ts are 15% cheaper than in March 2020, while this is 8% for the normal California. Moving on to the Roma, we can see a linear price decrease since mid-2022. Prices are down by 15.1% or $42,500, a substantial sum to lose in 1 year. I inspected the market a little bit closer and found that there are no significant signs of flattening. Cars between 4 and 15,000 miles lost slightly less than the market average during the last 6 months, but the differences are only small. Alright, let's summarize the numbers now and draw some comparisons. Over here we have the year-over-year loss rates by type, and to be fair, I don't think that there are any big surprises. The bars display the depreciation rate during last year, and the black lines the confidence interval for the rate if it's the result of several models. On average, we're looking at a rate of minus 12.6%, but there are of course differences between the models, and to a large extent, these differences can be explained by the age of the model. You can still find new 4-liter Vantages, LC500s, Romas and F-types, so naturally they have the highest loss rates. Especially the latest roadsters of the 4-liter Vantages fell quickly at a rate of 19.3%. With exception of those, rates across the new models are similar. LC500s, Vantage Coupes, Romas and new F-types all lost between 15 and 17%. Moving towards the right, we can see that especially the first generation V8 F-types and AMG GTs did better. Both lost approximately 11%, with some model-dependent variations on both ends of the spectrum. The Californias are the first models to lose less than 10%. Of course, the oldest Vantages did the best at 6 to 7%. Let's relate these numbers now back to the general market trend. Subscribers are probably aware of this trend, but if this is your first time watching, here's what happened during the last few years. Car prices, of course, surged during the pandemic, topped mid-2022 and then decreased with above average rates. The variety in the depreciation rates was relatively low. Only a handful of markets remained stable after they topped. In the beginning of the summer of 2023, we saw that the depreciation rates in some markets started to decrease to more normal values. And this return to normal depreciation dynamics is what we observed in the numbers we covered. Variety increased during 2023, meaning that new cars are mostly again falling much quicker than older cars. But what about the absolute depreciation rates? Did these front-engine GT cars lose more or less than the market average? Let's look at the final set of numbers. Over here we have the US year-over-year price changes for almost all cars that feature on my channel. On the horizontal axis we have the price change compared to last year in percentages, and on the vertical axis we have the number of cars to which this change applies. The average decrease during last year was 8.5%, and most cars lost between 13 and 5%. Now if I insert the front engine GTs in here, we can see that all but the old Astons lost more than the market average. The LC500, second generation F-types, 4-liter Vantages and Romas even fall in the top 25% of cars that lost the most. Even the Californias, which have been around for a while, lost slightly more than the average. Now as we discussed, partially this is driven by the fact that these cars are new cars. After all, the average is representative of both old and new cars, so it's only natural for new cars to fall on the left hand side of the average. However, I believe there's also an idiosyncratic component to this. We saw for example that new Audi R8s or 911s lost the same or less than the market average, meaning that this car type, a front-engine sports GT, might be simply more susceptible to depreciation than the more exotic super or sports cars. Let's wrap up and conclude. We saw that front-engine sports GTs mostly lost more than the market average during 2023. Only the oldest models, the 4.3 and 4.7 liter Vantages, lost less. The price trends revealed that most of the new cars are still falling linearly, with no bottom in sight, while the slightly older mostly saw a flattening of the trend during 2023. Now for all of you value-conscious buyers out there, this means that it really pays off to investigate the different price trends and to search for cars that are at their inflection point. The oldest cars lost the least, but not everybody wants an old car as maintenance costs are likely to be higher. Looking at something slightly newer, we saw for example flattenings in the first generation V8 F-type market, but also AMG GTs, which are again a bit younger, saw some flat price developments. Especially GTCs and GTRs did well during the last 6 months. Fancy something even younger? We saw that 2019 V8 Vantage Coupes lost very little during the last 9 to 6 months, and certainly a lot less than a new Roadster. Therefore, all of these cars could be, under the right circumstances, value-conscious purchases in this segment. Now the current depreciation rates, which is what we're talked about in this video, are only to a certain extent predictive of the near-term future. This video does then also not aim to predict what might happen in the future. Rather, it showed that as the market is normalizing, the variety in the depreciation trends is increasing and returning to more traditional dynamics, meaning that it pays off again to search for cars at their inflection point. The front engine GT market is of course much larger than the cars that I included over here. V12s are for example excluded. But the cars that featured in this video do not always yield enough content for a standalone market update, while I know that some of you appreciate videos for these cars. So I figured I'd combine them all in this update. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next week for a new video.